Hello everyone, welcome to Zoho Sheet's webinar. This is Jaya Shankari, the product marketer for Zoho Sheet, and I'll be the host for today's session. So in this webinar, we'll be looking at the various lookup functions in Zoho Sheet, including XLOOKUP, using which you can look up for a value and get a result value from a data table. For example, using VLOOKUP, you can search for a given value in one column of the data table and get a corresponding value as result from another column in the same data table. Let's get started. So this is the agenda for the webinar. So first we'll look into a brief introduction about functions in Zoho Sheet, and then we'll jump into the topic for today's session, that is lookup functions and their uses. And finally we'll have a demonstration where I'll be showing you how these functions can be used inside the spreadsheet with sample data. Functions are an integral part of a spreadsheet application, and in Zoho Sheet we provide more than 400 predefined functions that you can use for various use cases and data types. Zoho Sheet also provides you with contextual function help right inside the editor, so you can work with functions without any trouble. Apart from predefined functions, Zoho Sheet also provides you with custom functions powered by Deluge, using which you can create your very own personalized functions. Using custom functions, you can also bring in contextual data from other applications such as Zoho CRM, Books, or other third-party applications such as Trello, etc. And these predefined functions in Zoho Sheet are also available on our mobile apps, so you can work on functions on the go using your smartphones and tablets too. So now coming to the topic for today's session, that is lookup functions. So as I mentioned earlier, lookup functions are those functions that you can use to look up for a certain value and get a corresponding value as result from a data table. So these are the lookup functions that we are going to see in this webinar. So XLOOKUP is the recently launched function, and it is also the advanced version of all these lookup functions, and it has various advantages which I'll be mentioning during the demonstration. So now let's jump into the demonstration where I'll be showing you how you can use these functions inside your spreadsheet with sample data. So this is the spreadsheet I'm going to use for the demo. So you can see that I have separate worksheets for each function, so I'll be showing you how these functions can be used with examples for each. So first we'll start with the match function. So using match function, you can get the position of a value in a given data range. That is, you can get the row or column index of that particular value in the data range. So now you can see that I have a sample data here with the employee ID, date of birth, name of the employee, and the date of joining. So now let's see how we can find the position or the row index of Ming Yin, that is the employee Ming In, using match. So while entering any predefined function, you'll have to start with an equal sign and start typing the function's name. So you can see that as I start typing in the function's name, the corresponding suggestions are being shown below, so I can choose the desired function that I want. So, and once I choose the desired function I want, you can see the syntax of that particular function being shown right below the cell, so that makes it easier for me to work with the function. So here in this match function, you can see the first parameter is the search item. So that will be the value whose position you want to find. So here it will be the name of the employee. You can note that I'm giving the value within double quotes. When you enter a text value or a URL within a function, always make sure to give it within double quotes. And the next parameter will be search region. That is the data range in which you want to find the position. So that will be the name column here in my table. So you can see that the cell range is being highlighted with a color. So that makes it easier for me to know which data range is being used in the function. You can see a third parameter called match type. So match type is nothing but a parameter that lets you choose what kind of match you want to perform. That is an exact match or an approximate match. It is an optional value. You can even leave it without entering a value. But by default, match takes up an approximate match. But here I want an exact match for this particular function, so I'm going to enter it as 0. So 0 indicates an exact match here, whereas 1 and -1 indicates approximate match. And if you want any further reference regarding this function or the parameters that are being used in this function, you can simply click on the function name here in the tooltip, and that will open up the side panel with the function and parameter description for you. So you can refer the function and parameter descriptions and work on the function seamlessly. So now that I've entered the function, I'll just click on enter. So we've got a result as 4. So that is the position or the row index of that particular employee, that is Ming. So here you can see that in the selected data range, Ming is in the 4th row. So similarly here, I have another example where I found the position of the employee ID, that is 3038. I've given the search item as 3038, and then the search region will be the employee ID column, and then I've given the exact match value, that is 0. So here the result is given as 5. That's because here in the selected data range, the position of the employee ID 3038 is in the 5th row. And similarly, I have another example here on the right. So let's say you run a restaurant or a clinic. So on a daily basis, you will have a long list of people coming in, and you'll be allotting token numbers for each of them, starting with 1. So in that case, when you want to find the token number of a specific person immediately, you can use this match function for the same. So this is just a sample use case. You can use this function based on your use case and data too. So here you can see that I found the token number for the person called Mick Floyd. So I've given the search item as Mick Floyd, and the search region will be the name column. You can see that I've started with G2 and not G1 because I'm leaving out the header of the table, and I've given exact match value, that is 0. So this way I can find the token number of a specific person immediately using this function. So this is how match function can be used to find the position of a particular value in the given data range. Now let's move on to the next function, index. So now I'll just close the side panel here. Using index function, you can get the value that is present in a specific position in a data range. That is, in a particular data range, given the row and column number, you can find the value that is present in that particular position. So here we have an example data with the product names, units sold, the price per unit, and the total sales values. Now here let's find the unit price of a single product, that is flower vase, using the index function. So once I've entered the function name, so I've got the syntax below. So the first parameter here is data table. That will be the data range in which you want to look up and find the value. So here I'll just select this data table here. And the second parameter here is the row index. So here I want to find the unit price of the product flower vase. So in the chosen data range, you can see that flower vase is present as the 4th value here in the 4th row. So my row index here will be 4. And the third parameter here is the column index. So that will be the column from which you want to find the result. So here I want to find the unit price of flower vase. So here unit price is the third column here. So I'll be giving the column number as 3. So now that I've given the row and column index, you can see a fourth parameter called area number. So this parameter can be used when you have multiple ranges being specified. So you can also give multiple data tables separated using a tilde symbol for index function. So now since I've given only one data table for the function, I'm just going to leave it out. It's an optional parameter, and there we go. So here we have got $115 as the result, and here you can see that the unit price of flower vase is $115 that we've got from the C column. So this is how you can use the index function to find a value given the position of that particular value in a data table. So commonly these two functions, that is index and match, are used together to look up for a specific value and get the corresponding value from the data table. That is, when you're using an index function, let's say you do not know the position of that particular value, that is when you can use the match function to get the position of the value to get the result. So here we have the same sales data here as an example, and let's see how we can use both the index and match function to get the total sales value of the product called flower vase. So I'll start with the index function here. So the first parameter will be the data table, and the second parameter here is the row number. So now let's say I do not know the row number of the product flower vase in the given data range. So this is when I'll use the match function here. So to use a function within another function, you can simply start entering the other function's name here. So you can see that the tooltip shows the syntax for the match function here. So here the first parameter is search item, that will be the product name for me. So instead of entering the name of the item, I'm going to refer the cell that contains the name. And the second parameter is the search region. So that will be the product column. Note that I'm starting my selection from A2 because for index function we have started from A2. And then I want an exact match, so I'll give 0. So once I've entered the match function completely, I'll close it. So for row index, I've given the match function, and the third parameter for the index function is the column number. You can also use another match function to find the column number in your table if you want. But here, since I have only 4 columns in my table, I'm going to simply enter the column number. So the total sales value in this table is in the 4th position. So I'll give 4 here. So this way you can use these functions together to look up for a specific value and get the corresponding value from a data table. So the next function we are going to see is the VLOOKUP function. So VLOOKUP function is one of the most popular functions being used. So VLOOKUP function is one of the most popular functions used in spreadsheets, and VLOOKUP is nothing but vertical lookup function where you can search for a value that is in a specific column and get a corresponding value from another column in a data table. So now I have 2 different examples using which I'll be showing you how VLOOKUP can be used for an exact and an approximate match. So first we look at this example on the right. So in this example you can see that we have the employee ID, date of birth, name of the employee and the date of joining. So below that you can see that I have an employee ID here and I want the corresponding name to be filled on the right. So now let's see how we can use the VLOOKUP function to get the corresponding employee name using the employee ID given. So this is the syntax for the VLOOKUP function. So the first parameter here is the lookup value. So the lookup value is nothing but the value that you want to search for in the table. So that will be the employee ID here for me. And then the data table. So that will be the range in which you want to look up and get the result from. So one aspect that you have to keep in mind while working with VLOOKUP function is that the column containing the lookup value must always be the first column in your data table. So this is one disadvantage of VLOOKUP. So here in this table you can see that I have the employee ID column as the first column. So now that I've given the data table, my third parameter will be the column index. So the column index here will be the column from which you want to get the result value from. So here I want to get the name of the employee. So here in this selected data range, the employee name is in the third column. So here the column index will be 3 for me. And then you can see the fourth parameter as mode. So similar to what we saw in the match function, this mode parameter helps you choose what kind of match you want to perform. That is an exact match or an approximate match. So here I want an exact match for the employee ID that I'm searching for. So I'm going to use 0. So 0 or false indicates an exact match, whereas 1 or true indicates an approximate match in VLOOKUP. And mode is an optional parameter, as you can see. So if you do not enter any value, if you leave it blank, VLOOKUP will take up approximate match as default. You can see that I've got the result, that is the name of the employee is Aaron Williams. So you can see that the name of the employee with the employee ID 1452 is Aaron Williams in the data table, and that is what we have got in the result. So now one advantage of giving a cell reference as lookup value is that you need not change the function every single time you want to search for another lookup value. You can simply enter the next lookup value in this cell and the function will give the corresponding result automatically. So now let's say I want to find the name of the employee who has the ID 2508. So for that I'll simply enter the value here in the cell, and you can see that the name of the employee changed automatically. So this way you can simply change the cell containing lookup value and get the corresponding result. So the source data range that we have used in this function need not be in the same worksheet. You can also have the source data range in another worksheet in the same spreadsheet. So this way you can create dashboards where you can have the source data in other worksheets and get the corresponding values in the dashboard. So now that we have seen how an exact match works in VLOOKUP, so now let's see how an approximate match can be used in VLOOKUP. So here on the left you can see that I have an example on top. I have the scores and the corresponding grades being listed for me. So here you can see that the scores are actually rounded values which indicate a range, that is from 0 to 49 the grade is F, and from 50 to 59 the grade is D, and so on. So this is just like a reference table that can be used for giving the corresponding grades based on the scores. So here below this table you can see that I have the scores listed. So these are some examples of actual scores that the students might get. So you can see that I have 54, 43, 87 and 12. So these values are not listed in the table above. So this is where the approximate match in VLOOKUP comes in. So now I'm going to use VLOOKUP to find the corresponding grades for the scores that have been listed here. So my lookup value will be the score here, and the data table will be this table on top. So you can note that I have the score column as the first column in my data table, and the column index will be the grade column here, that is 2. And for mode, as I mentioned, when you do not enter any value for mode in VLOOKUP, it will take approximate match as default. So I'm just leaving it blank and I'll enter. So we've got the grade as D for the score 54. You can see in this table that the range 50 to 59 indicates D. So you can similarly fill these cells with the formula. So before we start filling up those cells, there is one tiny change that you have to do. That is, change the row numbers here in the source range as absolute reference. You can simply add a $sign before the row numbers in the source range to make them absolute. So absolute reference means that when you perform fill series, those row numbers will not change. So the source range remains the same even while performing fill series. So now that I've changed it to absolute reference, I'll perform fill series by a double click. So this way, no matter how long your table is, you can simply add a function to one particular cell and use fill series to fill the other remaining cells. So this is how VLOOKUP can be used to look up for a value and get the corresponding result value from the data table. So now let's move on to the next function, that is HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP, or the horizontal lookup function, is similar to VLOOKUP function, but the only difference is that VLOOKUP works vertically while HLOOKUP works horizontally. So you can see that on the right I have an example here. So in this example, you can see that I have some elements listed along with their atomic and mass number, and you can note that the table is arranged horizontally here. So when you have a table that is horizontally arranged, you can use the HLOOKUP function instead of VLOOKUP. So now let's see how we can find the mass number of an element, that is carbon, using the HLOOKUP function. So as I mentioned, the syntax for HLOOKUP is very similar to VLOOKUP. So the first parameter will be the lookup value, and then the data table. So in VLOOKUP, the column containing the lookup value must be the first column in your data table, and similarly in HLOOKUP, the row containing your lookup value must be the first row in your data table. So here you can see that the element values are in the first row, and then the row index, that is the row from which you want to get the result value. So here I want the mass number of the element, so that will be my third row in this data table. And then we have the final parameter as mode. So here I want the exact match, so I'll give 0. So this is how exact match works in a HLOOKUP function. And here on the left you can see that I have the same example we saw previously for VLOOKUP, but the only difference is that now the table is arranged horizontally. So I've already entered the function here. I'll just show you how it works. So here you can see that I've given the lookup value as the score here, and the data table is given from A2 to G3. You can see that I've changed the row reference as absolute values, and then I've given the row index as 2 here because I want the grade values. So that way I've got the corresponding grades, and I've done fill series here for the other cells. So this is how HLOOKUP can be used in your spreadsheets to get corresponding values from a data table. So now let's move on to the next function, that is lookup. So this lookup function can work both vertically and horizontally. So now in this example, you can see that I have only 3 columns, that is the employee ID, date of joining, and the name of the employee. And on the right, you can see I have an employee ID and I want the corresponding name. So here I'm going to use the lookup function. So in the syntax, the first parameter will be the lookup value, and the second parameter here is the search table. So here you can see a difference in the syntax here from the other lookup functions, that is for VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP we had to give the column or row index number, but here you can give the search and result table ranges separately. Even if you add or delete a column or row within the data table, this particular function will not get altered and will give you the correct result. Whereas in VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, since you're giving a static value as the column or row number, when you add or delete a column or row in the data table that is selected, the VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP functions will give a wrong result. So that is another disadvantage of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions. So now here I'll give the search table as the employee ID, and the result table will be the name column. So here you can notice that there is no mode parameter, so I cannot choose whether I want an exact or approximate match. So this is one disadvantage of the lookup function, that is lookup function only performs an approximate match and you cannot perform an exact match using it. So while you're choosing the search and result table separately, note that the size of the result and search table must be same. So now we'll move on to the next function. So XLOOKUP is the latest addition to this list, and XLOOKUP is also the advanced version of all these previous lookup functions we saw. So as we saw previously, there were some disadvantages for both the VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP and lookup functions, and XLOOKUP helps you solve all those disadvantages and also has some additional advantages to it too. So now we'll start working with this example and I'll show you what the advantages of XLOOKUP are. So here on the left you can see that I have an example here with the name, date of birth and the employee ID. And on the right here you can see I have the employee ID given. And below that I have the name and date of birth to be filled based on the employee ID on top. So unlike the other lookup functions we saw, here I have two cells to be filled. So this is one advantage of XLOOKUP, that is you can get an array of cells, that is more than one cell as a result. So now we'll see how we can get the name and date of birth of an employee using their ID. So I've typed in XLOOKUP, so you can see the syntax below. So the first parameter is the lookup value, so that will be the employee ID here on top. And the second here is the search table. So similar to the lookup function we saw previously, we can give the search table and the result table separately. So this means that even if you add or delete a column or row in the data table, this function will continue giving you the correct result. So now we'll have to give the search table. So here that will be the employee ID. So this is another advantage of XLOOKUP, that is unlike VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, you need not have the column containing the lookup value as the first column or row here. And XLOOKUP works both vertically and horizontally, so you can use XLOOKUP for both the tables that are positioned vertically and horizontally too. So now that I've given my search table, the next parameter is the result table. So that will be the range from which I want the result values. So here, as I mentioned, I want two values, that is the name and date of birth. So I'll be selecting these two columns here, that is name and date of birth. So now that we have given the lookup value, the search table and result table, you can see that XLOOKUP provides you with three more parameters that you can use to customize your function. So the fourth parameter we have is if not found. That is, you can provide XLOOKUP with a custom value to be displayed if the value you're looking for is not present in the table. So this parameter is also not available in the previous lookup functions we saw. So here I'm going to enter a value that is to be displayed if this particular employee ID is not found in the data table. So after that you can see that we have two more parameters, that is match mode and search mode. So match mode is similar to what we saw in the previous lookup functions. That is, it helps you choose the kind of match you want to perform, be it an exact or approximate match or even a wildcard match. And then search mode helps you define the direction of search. This is another advantage of XLOOKUP, that is the previous lookup functions we saw can only perform search from top to bottom of a given table, whereas XLOOKUP can also perform a reverse search, that is from the bottom to top of the given table too. So this search mode helps you define the direction in which you want the search to be done. So one more difference between XLOOKUP and the other lookup functions is that the other lookup functions will take up approximate match as default, whereas here XLOOKUP will take up the exact match as default. So when you do not give any value for the match mode parameter, XLOOKUP will take it as an exact match. So now for this example, I want the match mode to be an exact match, so I'm just leaving it blank. And I want the search mode to be default, that is from top to bottom. So I'm not going to enter any values for those two parameters. And there we go. So here you can see that we entered the function in one single cell and we have got a result in two different cells, that is the name and date of birth. So this way you can get more than one cell as a result using XLOOKUP function. So now let's look at another example here where we can use wildcard match. So this regex match or wildcard match can be used when you do not remember or when you do not know the complete lookup value that you want to search for. For example, let's say I want to find the employee ID of a particular employee, but I do not know his full name. So in this scenario, I can use the wildcard match. So here I'll show you how that can be done. So since I do not know the full name of the employee, I'm just entering the name I know, that is Ben, and then I'm going to give the wildcard symbols here, that is dot, asterisk. So these symbols dot and asterisk will get replaced with any number of characters during the lookup, and the corresponding result will be given. So you can also refer the side panel here on the right for the various wildcard symbols that you can use in XLOOKUP function or other lookup functions too. So now that we have given the lookup value, I'll select the search table. So here the search table will be the name column and then the result table. So I want the employee ID as result, so I'll select this column. And then I'll give a custom value that should be returned if the name is not found in the table. So in the previous lookup functions we saw, when you are performing a wildcard match, you need not mention the mode separately for that. But in XLOOKUP function, if you're using a wildcard match, you have to mention the match mode as 2 for it. Otherwise, XLOOKUP will not consider it as a wildcard match. So here, since I'm using a wildcard simple or wildcard match, I'll give the match mode as 2. And my search mode will be default because I want the search to happen from top to bottom, so I'm just leaving it blank. So you can see that we've got a result as 4323, and in the table here you can see that 43 and 23 is the employee ID of the employee named Benny Phillips. So we had only given Ben, dot and asterisk, and you can see how the function has got the exact employee ID of the employee named Benny Phillips. So this way, even if you do not remember the complete name of an employee or the complete value you want to look for, you can use the wildcard or XMATCH. So now we'll look at another example for XLOOKUP. So here you can see that I have a table on the left with the product and the sales value, and you can see that the category column is empty. And on the right you can see I have the list of products and the list of corresponding categories given. So let's say you already have a predefined table with the list of products and the corresponding categories separately, and now you're working on a sales report for the various products. So now here in this table I want to fill the corresponding categories of each product here in the sales report table, but if I start doing it manually, it's going to take a lot of time and effort. So now let's see how we can complete this table using the XLOOKUP function. So our lookup value here will be the product name, because I want to find the category based on the product name. And then the search table will be the product name list we have here in this table. And then the result table will be the category list we have here, because we want to get the categories. So now I'm going to leave the other parameters blank, because match mode, if left blank, will give an exact match, and that is what I want. And the search mode, if left blank, will perform search from top to bottom of the table list. That is what I want, so I'm leaving those two blank. And I'm also leaving the if not found parameter blank here. So if you do not give any custom value and if the value you're looking for is not present in the data table, the function will return an error. So there we go. So you can see that we have got the corresponding category for the product milk. So now I'm going to fill this column with the function, and before I do that, like we saw previously, I'm going to change the source row numbers to absolute reference, so they do not change when I perform fill series. So once that's done, I'll click enter. So now I can simply fill this column using fill series. So this is just an example data showing you how you can use XLOOKUP to even fill up table using a different source range. So this source table need not be in the same worksheet, it can also be in a different worksheet in the same file. So these are just a few examples of how you can use XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP can be used for a broad range of use cases over various data sets and with a lot of customization too. So now that we've seen how XLOOKUP works, we'll also take a look at another function, that is XMATCH, that was also released recently along with XLOOKUP. The XMATCH function is similar to the match function we saw initially, but it has some advantages similar to XLOOKUP function. That is, XMATCH function takes the exact match as default. It can also perform reverse search, and also you can customize the match mode and search mode for the XMATCH function. So here you can see on the left I have a long list of the name of the presidents of the United States of America, and I also have the term of office being listed for each. So now let's see how we can use XMATCH function to find how many presidents had actually held the office before Lincoln. So this is just an example that I'm showing you. You can use the XMATCH function for the various data sets that you have. So the first parameter here will be the name of the president that we're looking for. And then the search region will be the name column we have here. And then you can see two more parameters, that is the match mode and search mode. So as I mentioned, the match mode, if left blank, will take the exact match as default for XMatch. So I'm just going to leave those two parameters blank here because I want the default values. So now this function that I've entered will actually give me the position or the number for the current president that I've selected. But what I want to find here is the number of president that had held the office before the selected president. So now for that, I'm just going to exclude the selected value here. So I'm just going to put -1 and press enter. So 15 presidents had held the office before Lincoln. So this is just an example of how you can use XMatch to find the value. So this is how you can use the various lookup functions in Zoho Sheet to find corresponding results. Hope you found it useful. Do try out these functions in your spreadsheet and let us know how helpful they were. If you need any help or if you have any questions regarding these functions or any other feature in Zoho Sheet, you can drop us an email at support@zohosheet.com and we'll be here to help you out right away. Thank you all for watching this webinar. If you have any feedback about this webinar, you can comment them below. You can also watch our previous webinar videos using the link in the description. Thank you again for watching the webinar. Thank you.